In 1996, John Carpenter reunited with Kurt Russell for Escape from L.A., the long-awaited sequel to the cult classic Escape from New York. 15 years had passed since Snake Plissken last stalked the screen, and expectations were sky-high. What audiences got was a wild mix of satire, over-the-top action, and experimental special effects, from earthquake-ravaged cityscapes to a notorious CGI surfing sequence. Though the film flopped at the box office, it has since become a cult favorite, celebrated as much for its ambition as its flaws. Behind the scenes, the production was a battlefield of creative clashes, risky choices, and bizarre decisions. In this video, we'll explore 20 facts about Escape from L.A. they tried to hide. After Escape from New York hit in 1981, talk of a sequel began almost immediately. But throughout the 80s, studios showed little interest. To Hollywood, Snake Plissken was too dark, too cynical, and too weird for mainstream audiences. Carpenter moved on to other projects, but Kurt Russell never let go of the idea. By the early 90s, Carpenter, Russell, and producer Deborah Hill decided to take matters into their own hands. The three co-wrote the script themselves, giving Russell his first-ever writing credit. Carpenter had famously avoided sequels, but Snake was different. He felt there was more story to tell, and Los Angeles, recently rocked by riots and earthquakes, was the perfect dystopian setting. The result was less a sequel and more a satirical reboot, reflecting Carpenter's disgust with 90s America. Believe it or not, Kurt Russell's iconic eye-patched anti-hero almost stayed in the shadows forever. Russell had become a major star by the 90s, with films like Tombstone and Backdraft. But he was obsessed with Snake Plissken, describing him as the one role he couldn't let go. Studio executives weren't convinced Russell could carry a sequel 15 years after the original, and they flirted with the idea of recasting or even rebooting. Russell fought back hard, reminding them that Snake was his creation as much as Carpenter's. He pushed so strongly that he even insisted on co-writing the script to ensure Snake stayed true to his vision. Without Russell's persistence, Escape from L.A. likely would have died in development hell. 3. The $50 million gamble that sunk. With Carpenter directing again, Paramount Pictures greenlit Escape from L.A. With a budget of $50 million, massive compared to the $6 million budget of Escape from New York. Carpenter admitted he was shocked by the figure, since his style thrived on grit and limitations. The bigger budget brought lavish sets, more stunts, and the infamous early CGI effects. Unfortunately, it also raised expectations. When the film made just $25 million at the box office, it wasn't just a flop, it was a disaster, losing half its budget. The industry labeled Carpenter box office poison afterward, and Russell's passion project nearly ended both their careers. Today, fans call it misunderstood satire, but in 1996, it was branded one of Hollywood's most expensive failures. Ask any fan about Escape from L.A., and they'll mention one thing: Snake Plissken surfing through post-apocalyptic Los Angeles alongside Peter Fonda. In theory, it was supposed to be a wild, surreal action beat. In reality, the mid-90s CGI was laughably bad, even by the standards of the time. Carpenter later admitted he regretted the sequence, blaming the rushed effects and inexperience of the Buena Vista FX team, who had never worked with CGI on that scale. Critics pounced on the scene, calling it cartoonish and the moment Snake jumped the shark. Ironically, this one sequence overshadowed much of the film's darker satire, cementing its reputation as a goofy cult oddity rather than a gritty dystopian epic. If Russell was going to return as Snake, He had one major condition: no more real eye patches. During the filming of Escape from New York, the patch gave him constant migraines and impaired his vision during action scenes. For the sequel, he demanded a custom-designed, transparent eye patch that would still look intimidating on camera, but allow him to see through it clearly. This may sound trivial, but Russell argued that Snake was his body as much as his voice. And he wanted the freedom to perform stunts without crippling headaches. The change worked. Most viewers never noticed the difference, and Russell finally got to embody Snake without the pain that plagued him the first time around. Yes, that Bruce Campbell, the king of cult cinema and star of Sam Raimi's Evil Dead series, makes a blink-and-you'll-miss-it appearance in Escape from L.A. Campbell plays the Surgeon General of Beverly Hills, a grotesque, plastic surgery-obsessed villain leading a cult of disfigured rich people who constantly swap body parts to stay beautiful. His face is almost unrecognizable under layers of bizarre prosthetics, which explains why so many viewers didn't realize it was Campbell until years later. The role was intentionally short and weird, a darkly comedic detour that highlighted the film's satirical edge. While some fans love the sequence, others criticize it as another example of Carpenter leaning too heavily into absurdity. Still, it's one of those hidden gems that makes Escape from L.A. endlessly rewatchable. One of the most infamous sequences in Escape from L.A. is the Deadly Basketball Challenge, where Snake has to score 10 points in a timed death match or be executed. Many assumed the scene used stunt doubles or trick editing. But here's the truth. Kurt Russell actually performed the basketball shots himself, sinking each basket on camera. The problem? Russell trained so hard for the sequence that he injured his ankle during filming, forcing production delays. Carpenter later said Russell's commitment to authenticity was both inspiring and frustrating, since Snake's limp in some scenes wasn't acting. It was real pain. The basketball game may look ridiculous, but behind the camera, it nearly broke the star who made it possible. Carpenter has always used his escape films as social commentary, and when asked why he chose Los Angeles for the sequel, his answer was blunt: because LA is worse than New York. In the 90s, the city had been rocked by earthquakes, riots, and rising crime, and Carpenter saw it as the perfect setting for a dystopian satire. He described LA as a city of facades, plastic surgery, and broken dreams, which became central to the film's bizarre tone. While Escape from New York was grim and gritty, Escape from LA was a neon fever dream filled with absurd characters and larger-than-life parodies of Hollywood culture. In Carpenter's mind, Snake wasn't just surviving a ruined city. He was walking through a dark mirror of American vanity. Carpenter was no stranger to clashing with studios, but Escape from LA pushed him to the edge. Paramount executives demanded more action, more comedy, and especially more CGI spectacle to compete with the blockbuster trends of the 90s. Carpenter wanted a darker, more satirical movie that explored the absurdity of modern America. The compromises created a strange hybrid, part biting social commentary, part overblown action cartoon. Many of the sequences fans find silly today, like surfing and basketball duels, were pushed by executives hoping to create wow moments for marketing campaigns. Carpenter later admitted that the film wasn't entirely his, describing it as a studio picture dressed up as a John Carpenter movie. One of the boldest parts of Escape from LA is its ending, where Snake Plissken triggers an EMP weapon that shuts down all technology worldwide. In 1996, this was nothing short of radical. America was embracing the internet, cell phones were just beginning to take hold, and technology was being sold as the golden future. For Carpenter and Russell to end their film with a cynical anti-hero wiping it all away was like spitting in the face of cultural optimism. Studio executives panicked, insisting that audiences wanted a hero who saved the world, not one who pulled the plug on it. But Carpenter and Russell refused to back down, knowing Snake would never align with the government, rebels, or anyone else. He'd end the game altogether. Russell later described the ending as Snake's final middle finger to authority, a statement that every system is corrupt and no one deserves power. And while critics were divided at the time, the finale has since gained a prophetic edge. In today's world, where people debate our dependence on technology and wonder what would happen if it all collapsed, Snake's choice feels less outrageous and more like a warning, turning what could have been a generic sequel into one of the boldest, most subversive conclusions of any 90s action film. When fans first heard Steve Buscemi was cast in Escape from L.A., confusion followed. At the time, Buscemi was carving out a niche in indie and crime dramas like Reservoir Dogs and Fargo, not flashy action movies. Yet here he was, playing Map to the Stars Eddie, a sleazy Hollywood hustler who sells information and betrayal with equal charm. Buscemi admitted he took the part partly because he needed the paycheck to finance his own directing projects, including Trees Lounge, 1996. His jittery energy and slippery persona clashed perfectly with Snake's stoic toughness, creating an oddball partnership that felt like satire of the comic relief sidekick trope. Critics later pointed out that Buscemi's performance gave the movie a sly wit it desperately needed, even if Eddie's fate was as bleak as every other character Snake encountered. Pam Grier, the iconic star of 1970s blaxploitation films, shocked audiences with her role as Hershey Las Palmas, a transgender gang leader ruling over the ruins of Los Angeles. Grier took on the part with confidence, but the production team struggled with how to portray her transformation. Ultimately, they used a combination of voice modulation and subtle prosthetics to deepen her tone and alter her appearance. At the time, this was a bold casting choice for mainstream Hollywood, and though some critics felt the film mishandled Hershey's representation, Grier herself embraced the role as another example of her versatility. She even joked in interviews that Snake Plissken was the only man Hershey would ever follow. Today, the character is remembered as one of the strangest but most memorable parts of the film's twisted world. The dystopian Los Angeles of Escape from L.A. wasn't entirely fictional. It was inspired by real disasters. In 1994, just 2 years before the film's release, Southern California was rocked by the devastating Northridge earthquake, which killed dozens and caused billions in damage. Carpenter and his co-writers incorporated these fears into the script, imagining an even larger quake that turned LA into an island prison. The film's crumbling freeways, collapsing skyscrapers, and broken infrastructure were exaggerated versions of images seen on the news. Carpenter admitted he was fascinated by how fragile modern cities were, and he wanted Escape from LA to serve as both satire and warning. To audiences who had lived through the quake, the film's ruined cityscape felt uncomfortably close to reality. Like most Carpenter projects, Escape from LA had several sequences cut before release, many of which could have drastically altered the movie's tone. One deleted subplot featured Snake encountering a resistance group hiding beneath Los Angeles, which would have given him reluctant allies instead of leaving him entirely on his own. Another removed scene expanded on Hershey's backstory, fleshing out her rise to power after Los Angeles was cut off from the mainland. These cuts were largely due to budget constraints and pacing concerns. Paramount feared the movie was already too long. Unfortunately, none of these deleted moments were ever restored in special editions, leaving fans to speculate how they might have deepened Carpenter's world. Few people realize that Kurt Russell wasn't just the star of Escape from L.A. He was also one of its credited writers, shaping Snake Plissken's voice as much as Carpenter shaped the world around him. Russell believed Snake's dialogue had to stay short, sharp, and dripping with contempt, so he crafted lines like, "Call me Snake," and "Welcome to the human race," to embody the character's weary cynicism, keeping his words as ruthless as his worldview. Carpenter often deferred to Russell when deciding Snake's responses, admitting that no one understood the character better than the man who lived in his skin. And Russell himself insisted Snake was never meant to be a traditional hero. He didn't care about saving anyone, only surviving on his own terms. That philosophy defined his dialogue, cold, cutting, and delivered with the weight of a man who had seen the worst of humanity and no longer believed in it. Fans still quote Snake's lines because they're not just badass. They reflect a deeper worldview where rebellion is the only honest response to a broken system. In many ways, Russell wasn't just playing Snake. He was writing his manifesto, turning him into one of cinema's most enduring anti-heroes. By the mid-1990s, John Carpenter was burned out on studio filmmaking. Escape from L.A. became the battlefield where his frustrations boiled over. He openly clashed with Paramount executives who demanded safer choices and blockbuster spectacle to compete with films like Independence Day. Carpenter, on the other hand, wanted satire, cynicism, and weirdness. After endless compromises, he walked away from the system, later admitting he no longer trusted Hollywood to respect his vision. In interviews, he described the experience as a knife fight where nobody wins. Though the film failed commercially, it gave Carpenter clarity. He would only take on projects that allowed him full creative control. This explains why his later career moved toward smaller films, TV projects, and even music tours, leaving Escape from L.A. as one of his last big Hollywood swings. While much of the film is criticized for its clunky CGI, Carpenter and his team still relied heavily on practical effects. Miniatures, matte paintings, and full-scale sets were used to depict the ruined Los Angeles landscape. For example, the collapsing freeways and wrecked buildings were achieved using detailed models that were later blended with digital enhancements. Many viewers assume the film is entirely CGI-heavy, but in reality, the effects were a hybrid of old and new techniques. Carpenter even insisted on building physical props for Snake's weapons and gear, believing that tangible objects gave Russell something real to work with on set. Ironically, it's the practical effects that have aged better, while the early computer graphics, especially the surfing and hang glider scenes, have become punchlines. Still, the mix of effects shows Carpenter was trying to bridge eras, caught between Hollywood's past and its digital future. Like many Hollywood productions, Escape from L.A. filmed scenes with cameo appearances that never made the final cut. Isaac Hayes, who played the Duke in Escape from New York, wanted to return as the Duke's son, but Carpenter scrapped the idea, feeling it distracted from Snake's story. Another rumored cameo involved Tony Hawk, who supposedly contributed to the surfing sequences, though his presence was more behind the scenes than on camera. Even Kate Hudson, Kurt Russell's stepdaughter, was briefly considered for the role of Utopia, the president's daughter, but she turned it down to avoid acting opposite her father figure. These cuts leave fans wondering what kind of alternate version of the film might have existed, one packed with callbacks and celebrity appearances. Instead, Carpenter chose to keep Snake's world bleak, filled with disposable characters who fade as quickly as they arrive. Upon release in 1996, Escape from LA flopped hard, earning only $25 million on a $50 million budget. Critics were divided. Some praised its satire, while others mocked its cartoonish action. But as years passed, the movie found new life among cult audiences who appreciated its odd mix of dystopia, comedy, and cynicism. Fans began defending its flaws as deliberate choices, part of Carpenter's commentary on spectacle-driven culture. The film's ending, where Snake wipes out the entire world's technology, gained fresh relevance in an era obsessed with the internet and smartphones. Today, Escape from LA is often revisited not as a failed blockbuster, but as a misunderstood satire ahead of its time. Carpenter himself even claims it's 10 times better than Escape from New York, a statement that continues to spark heated debate among fans. After Escape from LA, there were serious talks of a third entry, Escape from Mars. The plan was to send Snake into space for a battle against supernatural forces on the Red Planet. But the box office disaster killed any chance of it moving forward. Instead, Carpenter recycled elements of the idea into Ghosts of Mars, 2001, with Ice Cube's character Desolation Williams standing in as a spiritual successor to Snake. Fans still speculate what a true escape from Mars would have looked like. Would it have been the ultimate expansion of Snake's legend, or another box office bomb? Either way, the dream ended there. Today, Snake Plissken's cinematic journey ends with the EMP blackout in Escape from LA, though rumors of reboots and remakes surface every few years. None have captured the wild, anarchic spirit of Carpenter and Russell's flawed but unforgettable sequel. Escape from LA may not have conquered the box office, but it carved out something far more lasting, a legacy of cult adoration, wild satire, and unapologetic weirdness. For every awkward CGI wave or outlandish basketball duel, there's a fearless idea underneath, daring to push boundaries Hollywood would rather avoid. Whether you love it or laugh at it, one thing is certain: Snake Plissken remains one of cinema's most unforgettable anti-heroes. Would you want to see him escape one more time?